The extent of the impact of the coronavirus pandemic on jobs around the world does appear to be worse than initially expected during the first months, April to June. According to the latest report from the International Labour Organization, that UN agency says reduction in hours worked over the period is the equivalent of losing 400 million full-time jobs. Pretty bleak picture, Stephen, no?
Very bleak, in fact, and worse than the prediction that came from the International Labour Organization just a couple of months ago. What they do in this survey is they look at the number of hours worked. This is them now looking at the period from April to June. So this counts people that have lost their jobs, those that have had their hours cut, but also those that are on temporary unemployment schemes or furlough schemes that we know a lot of countries, particularly in Western Europe, have put in place for this. So the ILO says that there are still 93% of the world's workers are working in countries where there are restrictions on businesses opening. So that means there are a lot of places that people can't get back to work. They say that the fall in working hours between April and June was 14%, and that's the equivalent to that huge figure, 400 million full-time jobs. That is much worse than the picture that we got from the ILO in March of this year, and it does give you an idea. Even though some of those people may go back to work when the temporary unemployment schemes are over, the impact on work has been enormous. Now, this trend played out in every region of the world. The ILO is also a regional breakdown of this. The biggest drop in working hours was in the Americas, down 18%, but significant falls across Europe, Asia Pacific, the Middle East and Africa as well. So no region spared by this. The ILO saying that lower middle income countries see when they group them by state of the economy, they saw the biggest percentage decline in working hours. They're also countries that are less likely to have a social safety net that's going to compensate losses for people who are out of work. One other interesting point in this report is the impact on gender. Women disproportionately affected by job losses in this report. According to the ILO, they say that's because the service sector has been the worst hit, which is a sector that has a larger proportion of female workers. Plus there's the impact of unpaid care, things like schools being closed, putting a huge strain on families, and that's hitting women hardest. The ILO warning that this could set back progress towards gender equality in the labour market because of the impact of the pandemic.
And Stephen, does the report say anything about the hopes for recovery?
Like many of the predictions that we've seen for economic change in recent months, it really depends on what happens to the evolution of the virus. If there's no second wave, the ILO says that by the end of the year, working hours will be about 5% lower than they were at the end of last year. That's the equivalent of 140 million fewer full-time jobs. If there's a second wave, of course that situation gets much worse. They're talking about a 12% reduction in hours by the end of the year. In any case, the report doesn't see a return to pre-pandemic levels for employment until 2021. The ILO also mentioning some of the challenges coming down the line as well, particularly as governments start to unwind the massive support that they've put in place for jobs and for businesses. Bigger budget deficits, bigger debts will be things that governments will eventually have to deal with, even if they haven't been looking at that issue as a priority at the moment. And unwinding those furlough schemes and short-term labour schemes will mean that we'll see job losses increase. We know we've had that warning for many quarters as well. If we think about Airbus again, that sector got a €15 billion bailout from the French government. That didn't stop that announcement of 15,000 job losses coming. There are many companies that simply don't have the demand to be able to keep up, even if they've gotten support from the government.